Today we have a ton of news to go over, including a first look at how the Heroic Plus, or now called Titan Rune Dungeons, will work, design intentions for Ulduar, and an hour-long talk between Blizzard developers and Classic Community Council members. So let's make a start. Before we go on, I want to do a quick shout out to today's video sponsor, PUBG Mobile. PUBG Mobile is a free-to-play battle royale with over 50 million active daily players, offering top-tier battle royale gameplay whenever, wherever. PUBG Mobile has a wide range of game modes for solo players, duos, or full squads, ranging from traditional BR format to Weapon Master, Arcade, Sniper Training, Team Deathmatch, and many more. And as the world's biggest football event begins, the 7-times winner of the Ballon d'Or, Lionel Messi, has partnered with PUBG Mobile for a special time-limited event. Messi will also be directly collaborating with the game by creating content and posting on social media. During this time, PUBG Mobile will feature tons of Messi customized content, such as 3 new skins, themed weapons, bags, ornaments, and even parachutes. You'll also be able to unlock his golden boots to gain a sprint and boost effect on certain maps. Coming soon alongside this will be PUBG's Global Chicken Cup, a huge football-themed event to celebrate the World Cup, including football grenades that pull in enemies around it, a football-themed park as a new location with loads of materials, a football car which you can get inside and roll around, and loads more. Suffice to say, if you want a game that loves the World Cup as much as you do, PUBG Mobile is the place to be right now. You can download PUBG Mobile through my link below for free and try it out right now. Many thanks to PUBG Mobile for the sponsor today. Let's talk WoW. I want to begin on the dungeons. Previously dubbed by the community as Heroic Plus, Blizzard have now officially named them Titan Rune Dungeons. Inside of each Heroic Dungeon, there is now a mysterious object that can be clicked to spawn a small golden orb. If all the players inside the Heroic channel on this orb, a few seconds later it will enable the Titan Rune difficulty. This is going to change a considerable amount about how each dungeon works. Now, each set of dungeon has been grouped together into clusters, and many share the same, I guess what we'll call a fix. Keep in mind this is all on the PTR right now and is being cleared quite comfortably by players in pre-BIS gear, which I suppose is the main target audience for this content, but we can talk more about that in a moment. So for the Halls of Lightning and Stone, the Titan Rune adds 5% damage and 190% bonus health for enemies. Periodically, players will gain an aura that increases their damage done by 1% and damage taken by 2%, stacking up over 12 seconds. Overall, mobs just have a ton of health to get through in these dungeons. For every single other dungeon I'm going to talk about, the base affix increases enemy health by 100% and damage by 30%. In Azure Narub in the Old Kingdom, mobs now have a chance to cast a web wrap on people, and you just have to have party members break them out before things get out of control. In the Oculus, Nexus, and Violet Hold, mobs will occasionally spawn 2 mirror images of themselves. These are low health and deal high damage through channeling arcane missiles, and they need to be focused down fast, especially in large packs. You also have to hit them directly. Think about how totems work or the explosive orbs on Mythic Plus retail. In Gundrak and Drak'Tharon Keep, mobs will now spawn a pool beneath themselves, which will cause them to heal for 100% of damage dealt. Seems pretty simple, a bit like Sanguine I suppose from retail, but more forgiving, as you can have a beefy tank with loads of mitigation. And will Disc Priest just hard counter this mechanic by absorbing everything? Potentially. In Utgard Pinnacle and Keep, mobs have a chance to afflict you with Glaciate, which puts a debuff on you where the stacks wear off as you move, leaving behind a slowing field, which does 3% max health frost damage every 5 seconds per stack remaining. It actually hits quite hard and was critting as well when I was looking at it. This is going to be a bit of a pain for immobile DPS or just casters in general. I suppose it's a bit like Volcanic from Retail Mythic Plus, but you have to move more and it's not as dangerous when you get hit because you always get hit by Glaciate. Finally, in the Culling of Strathol, mobs have a chance to afflict you with a zombie plague, which is the exact same as the one from the pre-patch, or at least that's how it's working at the moment, where after 60 seconds you'll be turned into a zombie and will have to be killed then resurrected. Mobs inside the dungeon will drop holy water, and there are holy water crates nearby which can be used to dispel the debuff. Otherwise you'll be forced to bring somebody with a disease dispel for this actually to work. So those are all of the new mechanics, and in the talk between Blizzard developers and the community council, Council, the difficulty and who is this content for was brought up, where it was more or less said it's not supposed to be an endgame alternative progression path to raiding or necessarily specifically tailored towards catching up, but it's just more relevant 5-man content and another piece of progression between the dungeon and raid ladder. In fact, I'm not even sure trying to make it into Mythic Plus would pan out well. In retail, they've had several expansions to design dungeons with Mythic Plus in mind. Wrath Heroics would probably fit a challenge mode better, as it was in Mists of Pandaria and Warlords of Draenor. In fact, Wrath already has a boss encounter where you equip worse gear on purpose to create a challenge for the Herald of the Titans achievement on Algalon. They go on to say there is space for this system to be expanded later in the expansion. At the moment, part of enabling the harder mode is called a Defense Protocol Alpha, which infers the existence of Defense Protocol Beta, Gamma, so on and so forth. And Blizzard were considering adding another layer of difficulty later in the expansion when we are in Phase 3 or Trial of the Crusader, where Titan Rune Dungeons may go on to drop hard mode Ulduar items, and at this point they would make the dungeons more tailored towards raid geared players. And as we will see later, Ulduar 10-man hard mode weapons will be item level 2, 4, 5, which will be pretty amazing from a dungeon. Speaking about item level, what about loot and emblems then? Right, so here's what they went over at the moment. Actually, before we get into it, Abyssal Crystals are going to be not very good anymore when this system drops. There's going to be a lot of epics coming into the game, so I wouldn't be overstocking them. They're already going to be going down, in fact. Anyway, as already known, all 10-man loot from existing tier 7 content, excluding Vault of Archivon, will be moved to these Titan Rune Dungeons, and each boss will have 3 to 5 pieces of loot added to their table, so it won't be completely random. End bosses specifically can also drop the tier tokens which cannot be bought through emblems. On top of a token, end bosses will also drop a 213 item level piece of loot. In other words, something that would have otherwise dropped from Malagos or KT. I can already see the looking for 3 more DPS, Surge, Needle, reserved spam. The 25 mode raid bosses will now typically drop 1 more item and give 1 more emblem as a counterbalance in case you did still run this mode to make it feel a bit more worthwhile. As for emblems, how they will work for the rest of the expansion has been confirmed. It will be the current raid tier offers the best emblem and the dungeon offers the tier below that. So for example, currently raids give Valor, dungeons give Heroism. In Phase 2, raids will give Conquest, dungeons will give Valor. In Phase 3, raids will give Triumph, dungeons will give Conquest, and so on. The emblem traders are already in the game too, and the cost of items bought through emblems will not be changing, which ends up being more generous than it was back in the day since we have more sources of badges. The Titan Rune Dungeons baseline will still drop emblems of Valor. However, the Daily Heroic, in addition to awarding 2 emblems of Conquest by default, can now also be done on the Titan Rune difficulty instead, where the end boss will drop a bounty satchel that contains some gold and 3 emblems of Conquest. Again, can foresee quite a bit of sudden changing to Master Looter end boss and reserving going on here. Also, there is a new meta achievement added for completing all the Titan Rune Dungeons, though currently no additional rewards such as pets, mounts, titles are being added. It might be time to re-add the perky pug to the game here, Blizzard. Seems like a good opportunity. Finally, when Phase 2 drops, Blizzard are currently undecided whether they will be removing the Plagued and Black Proto-Drakes from the glory of the Raider 10 and 25-man achievements. Originally, they did this and they got some backlash for it, and then later in the expansion, they will leave mounts in from meta achievements for the rest of the game. They did express interest in leaving mounts on these achievements so long as players were within a certain item level threshold, similar to how Herald of the Titans works. And that's everything on the dungeons that we got. It's more or less what I expected it to be, mid-tier content between dungeon and raiding. And as interesting as a full-on Mythic Plus concept would be, again, I don't know if the Wrath dungeons would even fit that format well at all. How will they scale when bosses do X% more damage? In Wrath, some classes just don't have defensive cooldowns at all. Shamans are the only class that can bring heroism. Healers are more restricted on what type of debuffs they can dispel, and so on. A challenge mode of dungeons could be interesting, but then we don't have transmog to show off any potential rewards. Could have titles and pets, I suppose. It's just something to go off. Of course, though, it's all on the PTR and is subject to change. I think for a first pass it looks good, but as for myself, I don't know how much I'll interact with this content since I don't really have any up-and-coming characters. If I just want to do the Daily Heroic, which I will be doing because Badges of Conquest, I can do the regular Heroic difficulty since I don't need any 10-man tier 7 loot on my 2 main characters anymore. Perhaps instead of adding the bag with 3 emblems of Conquest for the Daily Titan Rune Heroic, which will will inevitably cause drama, just add one Emblem of Conquest to the end boss for the daily instead of it being one Emblem of Valor. I think this content will see a lot more play if that one change was made. And so far in Classic, we have had way more sources of emblems than they did originally. We've had emblems of Valor from 10-mans from the beginning and heroism from questing, so I don't even think it'll cause any problems. That is all the dungeon stuff covered. On to Ulduar then. So as expected, Ulduar loot has been buffed and we now have concrete numbers, or at least the numbers on the PTR that they seem to be going with. All normal mode loot has been buffed by 6 item levels and all hard mode loot by 13 item levels. Algalon is currently showing as +6 item levels, should be 13 since he's a hard mode only boss. Valanier has been buffed from 245 to 258, and Blizzard are actively targeting and bringing down the melee damage on this weapon so it's not enhancement bis. They clearly want just healers to be using this thing. Anyways, here's a few examples of how this looks in practice. Ulduar 10-man normal has gone from 219 to 225, Ulduar 10-man hard mode weapons have gone from 232 to 245, Ulduar 25-man normal from 226 to 232, and Ulduar 25-man hard mode from 239 to 252. That's one item level higher than Icecrown Citadel 10-man normal. And as a quick comparison to Trial of the Crusader, 10-man normal there is 232, 10-man heroic 245, 25-man normal 245, 25-man heroic 258. Ulduar 10 hard mode weapons specifically will be on par with Trial 10-man heroic items, otherwise Trial 10 heroic will be upgrades, and Trial 25 heroic will be upgrades over Ulduar 25-man hard mode, but not as substantially as they used to be. So by the time we're getting into Ulduar, we're going to be way more powerful than we were originally. And we've seen with raiding content through Classic time and again that as a player base we're way better at the game. Your average player is well improved compared to 2008, and if we were to walk in there and after a few weeks be steamrolling Ulduar, well, it would take a bunch of the fun out of it, wouldn't it? Well, I think it would, yes. So to this end, Blizzard are planning to deliver a pre-nerf Ulduar. The testing of the raid has yet to hit the PTR as of doing this video, but from old patch notes there are pages and pages of changes that affected the raid over its duration. Plus, I think most of us, myself included, need a bit more context to changes rather than X mechanic happens more often, because I'm not even sure if I'll remember what any given mechanic in the raid was supposed to do in the first place. Either way, I'll be testing this content when it's up and hopefully giving some insight on what should be a version of Ulduar which no one has ever fully experienced before. During the talks, Blizzard also gave a little more insight onto the changes. They say Algalon is getting a percentage damage and health buff on top of being pre-nerfed to ensure he's up to the challenge that he should present for the likes of Herald of the Titans. Algalon will be the only boss to get this flat buff treatment. Any other boss which changes numbers wise will be doing so because it's consistent with patch changes. Blizzard also said, similar to TBC, that they aim to deliver the hardest version of each encounter as it existed back then. It makes me wonder which boss is going to be the Lady Vash of tier 8, which if you didn't play Lady Vash in Serpent Shrine Cavern, she would mind control 2 people, massively buff their damage and make them immune to CC. If it went on the wrong people, they would turn around and start one-shotting your raid members before you could do anything about it. It wasn't great, to be honest, but it was accurate to TBC. Along the same line, they said while starting with the hardest, they aren't necessarily against toning encounters down ahead of the next phase releasing if they are proving too much of a wall. So referring back to TBC again, Vash and Kael'thas were nerfed ahead of tier 6 dropping. They kinda had to do that back then. You had to attune if you wanted to go into tier 6, which involved defeating these 2 bosses. And they were the end bosses too, and I think it's more okay to have an end boss be the wall of a raid because they're not locking you out of being able to gain upgrades from the other encounters that exist. During the talk, they mentioned that XT full-on pre-nerf had the potential to be a serious gatekeeper, and I don't see them making such an early boss, which literally gatekeeps the instance, having a similar clear rate to Vash or KT. If less than 10% of the people have got past the 4th boss by week 2, I don't think Blizzard's gonna see that as a success story, put it like that. Finally, the question of are you going to be doing a pre-nerf Trial of the Crusader or Icecrown Citadel was posed, to which they said, don't really know at the moment, we'll see when we get closer. These 2 raids did, in my experience from looking back at it, have a lot fewer changes than Ulduar though, but generally speaking, I think starting off with the harder versions of the raid is okay, you can always tone them back later. And that's the news, Titan Rune Dungeons and a version of Ulduar tailored to its most difficult iteration ever. As mentioned, I'll be testing Ulduar later on when it drops to get a better impression of it, so stay tuned for that. Other than that, let me know your thoughts on everything we've gone over here today, and as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.